Sandee Sgarlata is America's happiness coach. She has an incredible backstory. Some tragedy has happened to her in her youth with her mother dying, and some other things have happened. And she's turned it all around, and she's devoted herself to helping people, helping business owners. She's going to move shortly to athletes. Just an incredible story. She's doing great things. We discuss her top 5 ways to get happy. Very interesting. I'll give you a hint. Number one is taking care of yourself. But we discuss them all 5, and we have another list that she's made where you need to reset your stress. And number one there is exercise. I don't want to give you much more. It's a great conversation with Sandee Sgarlata. Enjoy. Thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz. People ask me, how did I lose 130 pounds? The quick answer is always discipline. I started my business, wasn't paying attention to my health, was eating too much, drinking too much sweets. My daughter was born. Next thing I know, I'm pre-diabetic, I have hypertension. I knew something had to change. Discipline. I, like many of you, have faced many challenges in your career, in your family, in your life, in your faith. How did you attack them? How did you approach them? How did you solve them, hopefully? It all had to have some degree of discipline. I'm also asked, how did you found and start a tech business and it lasted over 25 years? Discipline. I was committed to it, enjoyed technology, didn't enjoy some aspects of it, but knew it was necessary. Discipline. Our podcast mission, how do we use discipline to better ourselves and society? Join me, please, as I talk to interesting people and discuss how they use discipline in their family and their passion and their careers and how it helped them. Our podcast vision, growth through learning from others. Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. It'll be light and serious. Join us, please. Thank you for consideration. It's so nice to meet you, Sandee.
Nice to meet you, Joe. Do you go by Joe or Joey?
I go by Joe. My mother calls me Joseph, and my Italian relatives call me Giuseppe. So it's fine. And are you in the Southwest?
I'm in the Southeast,
Southeast.
Virginia.
Ah,
Virginia.
I see.
I don't really consider it the South, but technically it is.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, quote unquote. Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
So you are America's happiness coach. I watched your videos. I feel like I know you.
Yeah. That's what I'm
Excellent.
striving for. You got to pick a brand and go with it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Now you've had some tragedy. You talked about when you were a child, your brother had passed, and I mean
Yeah.
that really started on your road.
It did, but I didn't know it at the time, of
Mm,
course, right? Because I was too caught up in the grief and all of the sadness that was surrounding me for many, many years. My mom, I don't talk about it in my book because I didn't want to put a negative light on anybody in
I
my
see.
book. But I kind of lost my mom for 10 years.
Hmm.
So he died 2 weeks before my 13th birthday. And so I kind of raised myself. And, so yeah, it was really hard. But I didn't realize it was going to put me on this trajectory in life, right? A lot of times when you experience something so tragic, you don't know until many years later the reasons why you had to go through it, right? And that's true for any situation,
Very interesting.
really. You know, you may experience something, a loss, and it could just be the ending of a marriage or, something that's not a huge deal is losing someone so close to you.
Mm.
And you don't always know it right away. Sometimes it can take years before you finally look back and say, oh, yeah, that's why that needed to happen, because it made me who I am today.
Very interesting. And did you find yourself trying to make your mother happy during those times?
I don't remember, honestly.
Oh, come on,
Most
it's
of
not
my
that long ago.
memories, yeah, yeah, it was a long time ago. Um, my memories mostly were seeing her sitting at the kitchen counter
Hmm.
with a cup of coffee and a cigarette,
Mm.
And she'd be sitting there just with this blank stare on her face, and she would push a dollar bill across the table to me because that was what lunches cost. And, be like, have a good day. And that was it. Um, and it was, you didn't know how to approach her, right? I mean, my mom truly did the best she could. She
Right.
really did. This was in 1978. It was a long
Mm.
time ago.
Mm.
And she didn't know how to deal with such a tragic loss. She had 5 children, and this was her firstborn son. He was number 2 out of 5. And, she didn't know how to, like, who knows how to deal with that, right? And it wasn't until my son was born and I was holding him in the hospital. He was born for about 10 minutes.
Mm.
And all of a sudden, I had just a smidgen of what she must have gone through. Because when you have a child, the love is so immense. And if you've never had a child, it's hard to explain. And it's the same for mothers and fathers alike. But what comes with that love is such an immense fear that I thought, oh my gosh, And so I had a new appreciation for my mother at that point because, my son is now 21. Well, he'll
Mm.
be 21 in a couple of weeks, actually. Um, so I can't even fathom what a parent must go through that loses a child. And I pray to God that I never have to go through that, right? Parents shouldn't be burying their children.
Horrible, horrible thing. But
Yeah.
about 16 years ago, my sister had passed away in an auto accident, and my father told me, and I had to be the one. I took it upon myself to be the one to tell my mother. I didn't want to hear from somewhere, from anyone else. And yeah, just to see that, that transformation of being a functional, complete person, and then having your child gone. It's just, I have 2 daughters now myself, very similar age to your son. And it's certainly the deepest fear. And it leaves yourself a bit vulnerable because, you have that. So now we
Yeah.
pivot to happiness.
Now we pivot to happiness because here's the thing. What ended up happening after my brother died is that I created a couple of stories
Hmm.
surrounding it. The first story was that because the day that I found out that he died, it was one of the happiest days that I could remember.
Hmm.
And so I associated my happiness with his death.
Interesting.
So I would not allow myself to be happy because I felt, and as crazy as it sounds, but this is as a 12, 13-year-old little girl, that's where my brain went, was like, I can't allow myself to be happy because something horrible is going to happen.
Hmm.
Okay. The other story I made up about it, and this, I was raised Catholic, and, you have to walk up and view the casket, view the body in a casket. My mom made me go up with her to pay our last respects. And she looked at him and said, he doesn't look real. He
Hmm.
looks like a mannequin. Well, it took 3 weeks for his body to get here because he was in Germany.
That's right.
And like I said, it was 1978. Things are very different today. Things are very different then. So it took 3 weeks. So there was a lot of makeup on him. So I took that, and that was how I dealt with the grief. Was I was like, he's not really dead. My active imagination kicked in, and I just made up these stories that he was in the witness protection program, or that he was a spy,
Hmm.
or something like that, and that someday he's going to come back. So that was how I chose to deal with it. And it took some years of therapy. And but the cool thing about that story that I made up, that he was coming back, is every year I have at least 1 or 2 dreams every single year where I open up the front door and he's standing there.
Wow.
And I just wake up with this smile on my face because it's like a reunion, so to speak. He visits me in my dreams, and I wake up and I'm like, oh, you know, and of course I know he's not coming back, right? But, as a kid, those are some of the things that we tell ourselves. And then we get into adults, and, for me, I had to hit rock bottom in my life in order to get the help that I needed and turn my life around. So,
Incredible. And you were a figure skating coach.
yeah.
I-
Yeah. So I was a competitive figure skater. in my youth, my three brothers all played ice hockey, and my father coached it. Well, back in the 70s, women did not play ice hockey, and
Right.
I wanted to play ice hockey because I was such a tomboy, having three boys around me. And instead, they made me put on a little tutu and put me in. And I'm like, I don't want to wear this tutu. I was a tomboy. So I got into figure skating. I had no chance as a figure skater. Back then, they did the figure eights, and I'm a little attention deficit. So to sit there and be expected to go around a circle, for an hour at a time was just like, you know. So, but I had fun and I loved it. And then in the early 90s, an ice rink opened up right in where I was currently living at the time in Reston, Virginia, which is a suburb of Washington, D.C. And I figured I would just teach group lessons to boys and girls and just pass on my love of the sport. I had zero expectations. And I ended up having a student. I saw him, I was teaching a lesson, and he was in rental skates, and he was doing an axle. So for anybody who knows anything about figure skating, that's pretty hard to do,
Mm.
especially in rental skates because they're really flimsy. And I talked to him afterwards, and I was like, "What are you doing? Like, how did you teach it?" He goes, "Oh, I just watched it on TV and I taught myself how to do
Hmm.
it." So, yeah, he was just incredibly talented. And so I had an old pair of skates that happened to fit him. I painted them black, and those were his first skates. And we convinced his mom to, take lessons from me. I ended up taking him to US Nationals and his first international competition where he won a gold medal.
Oh my God.
And it was incredible. It was incredible. And shortly after that, the figure skating world. It can be a little toxic and very cutthroat, as you
Mm.
can imagine,
Mm.
and it's like that in a lot of the different sports. Figure skating is no different. Um, and my son was born a couple of years later, and I just decided to step down while I was on top. And he went off to college. He ended up being an alternate for the Olympics in pair skating.
Wow.
Yeah. And we still keep in touch to this day. So it's really neat. And he went on to get an MBA from Stanford University, and he's doing great things in the world. So
Very cool. And so how did you make the pivot to, happiness coach?
so my son was born in the year 2000, and I winded down my coaching practice, but I love to coach. And
Mm.
because I had been on this journey of self-discovery and self-improvement, I wanted to work with other people and share my knowledge because I had been to so many workshops and seminars. I mean, I became obsessed with self-improvement.
Hmm.
I call myself a self-help junkie, and I still am to this day. I'm always learning and signing up for courses and this and that because you can always learn something from another person, right? But so I got certified to be a life coach in 2004, and prior to that, I started an IT recruiting company. I had you know played around with recruiting or whatever. My little brother is a recruiter, and he convinced me. I started this company, took it to seven figures in less than 18 months,
Nice.
and then the dot-com crash happened in March of 2001, and no recruiting company had a chance at that
Right.
point. So closed up shop. January 2003. My son was 2.5 years old, and that was when I started to get into coaching. Um, but it was just I started doing workshops, like live workshops, and I was teaching the law of attraction, and I didn't even know it.
Hmm.
Never even heard of the law of attraction. It just was something that made sense to me. So I started doing that. I published my first book in 2009. And then, life happens as we were busy making other plans. And I went through a divorce in 2010, 2011, and ended up being a single mother,
Mm.
like 100% because of something that happened with my ex-husband. We can come back to that. But I had to go back to work full time in order to make enough money to make ends meet. And so I got back into recruiting because that's coaching, right?
Ah.
And it's a natural fit for me. And so when my book was released earlier this year, I started making plans. I'm going to get back into this because this is my life's purpose,
Hmm.
is to work with other people. And I'm on a mission to bring happiness back in the world, especially in the United States, because we really need it. We have major problems here.
We certainly do. Yeah, we certainly do. Well, that's quite a transformation there. And I I was just watching and listening to some. You have 5 ways to get happy. Everybody loves these top 5 ways, and uh, take care of yourself first.
Yes. Yeah, I learned that the hard way because I wasn't taking care of myself. And when we're trying to be Superman or Superwoman, if we're neglecting ourselves, you can't be that person for everybody else in your life. And so you have to take time to take care of yourself. And it was interesting because my ex-husband used to say, "Well, you're just being narcissistic." And I'm like, "No,
Hmm.
I'm not." Because I would tell him, like, I have to take care of myself first. And he really thought that I was being narcissistic. And I said, "No, because I can't take care of you. I can't take care of our son unless I'm taking care of myself because I have needs too." And that was 20 years ago
Hmm.
when I was really struggling with that because I was trying to do it all and have it all. And I realized that something had to give. And the thing that had to give was that I wasn't taking care of myself. And it's not that hard to do. Now, ever since, I know what I need to do. If I need to reset my day at any time, now that I'm working from home full time, have been for almost 18 months,
Mhm.
there's days when at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, my brain is just exhausted because I'm like a racehorse. I go, 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 go.
Hmm.
And then I just have to crawl in bed. I'll set my alarm and I just close my
Hmm.
eyes. And sometimes I fall asleep, sometimes I don't. But hey, right? A lot of Europeans, they have their siesta. There's something to that. So I have a siesta, not every day, but a lot of times.
Your body calls for it and you
It
respond.
totally,
It's
yeah.
interesting you say that about taking care of yourself. So in the 90s, I started an IT firm and I got married and I had a child. And before I'm 340 pounds and, I'm
Oh my
eating.
gosh.
Yeah, I
Well, you're definitely not that now.
no, I'm certainly not. I'm certainly not. And, my daughter was born. The doctor's like, you're pre-diabetic. You've got to do something. So I had to kind of come to Jesus moment. And, I worked out
Yeah.
every day for 7 months. I cut everything in half. I lost 100 pounds. I did some triathlons. But my point is that how am I going to possibly take care of my family and my new daughter if I'm unhealthy like this?
Right. Exactly.
Gratitude is your second.
Gratitude. Oh my gosh. That is the quickest way to shift your mood from negative to positive. I'm telling you, I would
Hmm.
love to hear somebody who says it doesn't work. If that's you, you're just being stubborn. But gratitude. So we all have an electric field, right? Or electromagnetic field around our body, and there's different levels of consciousness. So when we're sitting down here in negativity, there's the laws of consciousness that David Hawkins put out, and there's a chart you can look at it, and it shows all the different emotions, and it goes up the chart. So when you start focusing, so let's just say you're feeling guilty or you're feeling shame, that's way down here, very, very low negative emotion. So when we start focusing on everything we have to be grateful for, what it does is it begins to raise your energy levels up and up and up.
Hmm.
So gratitude, I always tell people the best way to do this is every day list 10 things that you're grateful for, or however many you can think of. And at any time during the day,
Hmm.
when you're in a stressful situation or you're feeling, you know, down on yourself, something happened, whatever, right? Life is always throwing us those curveballs. Start focusing on everything you have to be grateful for. And it's really great if you can write it down,
Hmm.
like use a notebook and just write it down, because that's using more of your senses, and it's just gonna resonate more deeply within you. And I'm telling you, it just, oh my gosh, there was a couple of months ago, my son was driving back to college. Actually, it was in January. He was going, no, March. It wasn't daylight savings time yet, but he was driving back to school. He was on his last hour of his trip, and it was dark out. It's like a 9 hour drive. And he called me and he was like, "Mom, can you just talk to me for the next hour?"
Hmm.
And because remember, his dad's not in the picture right now.
Right.
So it's just me. So he called me and he was just very upset about something. I just was there listening to him, and he was upset about something with his friends. You know, that age group, there's always drama, right? There's always drama. I heard him out and I was like, look, there was nothing I could do to solve the situation. It was one of those things that was just going to resolve itself. But I said, can we just start thinking about everything that you have to be grateful for? I'm like, you've got a nice car that's reliable transportation that's driving you back to college. Look at all the great friends that you have. Within seconds, I could hear his voice shift because we know our kids, right?
Yeah.
And for the next 20 minutes, the last 20 minutes of the ride, we were laughing and joking, and it completely shifted the whole conversation. And as a matter of fact, the last 10 minutes, he goes, you know what? I'm good. I got the last 10 minutes. I'll let you go now. And I was like, okay.
Wow.
But it's just really incredible. It's the most incredible tool out there.
Gratitude, because it kind of puts you in your place. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, when you think about it, Joe, there's always somebody that has it worse off than you do.
That's right.
I have a podcast too, and yesterday I interviewed somebody and I couldn't find her information, right? So right before we started recording, I wrote down her website, but it didn't register. We start talking. She was a quadriplegic.
Wow.
And I was thrown for a loop. And I said, how do you shift? Because you have to have days where you're like, why me? This is this beautiful young woman who traveled the world. She was an athlete. I mean, just very, very sad story, right? She goes, oh, yeah, I have those moments. I go, well, what do you do to shift and get back to a higher state of, energy and being? She goes, I talk to other paraplegics who have it worse off than I do. I'm like, bingo, right? She knows how to take care of herself.
Absolutely. I believe it's an Israeli proverb, and I may have this wrong, but something where you go to a mountain, perhaps it's Mount Sinai, and you're able to get rid of all your problems. You're able to release them into the mountain. But the trade off is you have to take someone else's. And the lesson always is you always go back down the mountain with your own problems.
Yeah.
You never take because you're not worse off.
Exactly. And I talk about in my book how, sometimes one of the things that can make us unhappy is that we compare ourselves to others, right? You look at movie stars or just other people in your neighborhood. And I know where I live in a very wealthy neighborhood. I'm not one of them, but there's a lot of wealthy people around me. And it's hard not to fall into that trap of, oh, look at the car they're driving or look at that. But when you start comparing yourself to another person, you need to be willing to take all the good and all the bad, because I promise you, their baggage is probably something that you don't want.
That's right.
Right? You don't want their baggage. I don't want that baggage. My baggage is enough. So we have to be willing, we can't compare ourselves to other people because, it's hard enough dealing with your own. And at least my baggage, I'm familiar with it.
Right.
I wear it on my shoulder every day. Right? I know what it is. I don't want somebody else's.
It's with me all day. Your third is forgiveness.
Oh, yeah. Forgiveness. Oh my gosh, this is so huge. And I was one of these people who would say, I'm not forgiving that person because they don't deserve it. And I'm not letting them off the hook. All right. My ex-husband, so I brought him up earlier. So we had a very tumultuous marriage that almost ended at 9 years because I was told I would never get pregnant. And I resigned to the fact that I was never going to have children. And I'm like, well, I'm not staying in this marriage. So we agreed to separate. That day, I found out I was pregnant.
Wow.
So we stayed married for another 10 years. And finally, in 2010, I was like, I'm not getting any younger. I need to move on. So we got divorced. It was hard enough trying to forgive him for 20 years or a 20-year marriage and everything that had happened. Okay. And I was still working through that. October 4th, I think it was, 2013, I get a call in the afternoon saying, I hit a motorcycle and 2 people are dead. My ex-husband, who is a very high-level, successful lawyer, was driving drunk and hit a motorcycle and killed 2 people. And he has been in prison for 7 years.
Oh, my goodness.
In my book, my son wrote his college essay And I have that in my book of his experience, how he experienced that tragedy. So talk about having to forgive, right? Because it's been 7 years. It was 7 years on Saturday that he's been in prison. And I didn't make a lot of money at all. And it was really hard. I lost alimony, I lost my child support, but it wasn't even the financial part of it. I was able to make ends meet. How do you deal with a 13-year-old little boy with that stigma?
Right.
And we, like I said, we live in a very affluent county, and we're not inner city folk where one out of whatever the statistic is has a parent in jail,
Mm.
right? So having to forgive him was huge, and it took me a very, very long time.
Wow.
I'm grateful to say that we are now at a point today where we are like brother and sister. When I talk to him, like, love you, love you, I have done everything for him. I've had to clear out the house. I've had to do it. I've had to manage his life for the last 7 years. But what I learned about forgiveness, let me bring it full circle, is that forgiving someone is not letting them off the hook for what they did. All right. All it's doing is freeing you from the pain and misery you're causing yourself from that situation. So while I was so upset that he was irresponsible, right? He made a huge mistake. He didn't mean to kill two people, right? Nobody means to do that. But the pain that he's put my son through has been unimaginable. And it has been so hard to forgive him because, my little boy, right? When his dad, the accident happened when it was ironically 2 weeks after his 13th birthday. And remember, my brother died 2 weeks before my 13th birthday. Yeah. But he left for prison on August 14th, 2014. And I had to hold my son, sobbing hysterically. And then I went through all of those years. And now my son turns 21 in a few weeks, and his father is still in prison. I mean, he's a man now. My son is a man. And it's been very, very difficult. It's been such a lesson in forgiveness because it's very hard for me not to get angry with him. While I've been affected, I'm okay. I'm going to be okay, right? It's just money. I don't even care about that, right? Money doesn't make me happy. Yes, I struggled for a few years. It was very hard, but and thank God I divorced him. I was like, could you imagine? We'd be living in somebody's basement right now because I could not even afford to rent an apartment.
Wow.
Right. But just having to be there for my son all those years and not holding on to a resentment toward my ex-husband for what he's put my son through, it's been very, very hard. But at the same time, my son has learned such valuable lessons. Right. And I was talking about that in the beginning. Like sometimes we don't always see what the lesson is that we're meant to experience. My son, as he says in his college essay, he's like, I learned that life happens in moments and we can't let one moment ruin the rest. And he wrote that his sophomore year of high school.
Wow.
And it was very profound. Very profound.
Very profound. My goodness. Forgiveness. It's almost, what is the one expression where when you don't forgive somebody, it's like you drinking poison. It hurts you, but it doesn't do anything for them. It's
they don't care.
Horrible. Wow.
Well, because it's also like one of my first therapists said, when you're pointing the finger at somebody else, there's three fingers pointing right back at you.
Right.
And when you're holding on to a resentment, you're blaming them. And it's not about them, it's about you. You need to free yourself of that bitterness you're feeling towards this other person. It's just, they're taking up space in your head is all you're doing.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's only hurting you. Shift your perspective, number 4.
Yes. So your perspective is the lens in which you view the world, right? and I can't see you that well because I don't have my reading glasses on. Oh, there you are.
Yes.
So see, there's a glare there, so I don't keep them on.
Yeah, me
Your
too. Me
perspective
too.
is the lens in which you view the world. And when you shift your perspective, it changes your perception. When
Hmm.
you change your perception, it changes your beliefs. And when your beliefs change, your reality changes. So if you shift your perception, you can shift your reality. Because here's the thing, our
Hmm.
perception can change at any moment, right? My siblings and I have a very different view of our childhood, right? We all have a different experience, but
Yeah.
yet we were raised by the same parents. And I love this example. If you have two employees reporting to the same boss at the same company, and they're both asked to work late to finish a project, one person perceives it as a negative thing because they have to change their plans and they have to work late. How dare them? The other one's like, awesome, and he views it as an opportunity to shine. Right? Same situation.
Hmm.
And, so many times I call it like people are like this, like racehorses, right? Where they have those blinders on and they're not willing to see that there's so many other possibilities out there. And so perception is huge. And I was listening to a book on tape by a sports psychologist, and he was saying how stress is really an illusion because it's the way you're perceiving the situation,
Hmm.
right? And there's always another way. Like that's kind of one of my superpowers is I'm always able to see things from multiple perspectives.
Hmm.
And sometimes it's a curse, sometimes it's a blessing, but there really is. There's always another way that you can see another side of a situation. And by doing that, and sometimes it's just making up a story. Just make up a new story about it, right? Because so often we're making up stories about what we think just happened or what we think is going to happen, right? Usually it's what we think just occurred.
Hmm.
Oh, she blew me off. She must not like me. I'm making up a story. Is that a fact? No, it's not a fact. I don't know that she doesn't like me. I don't know that she blew me off. Maybe she didn't see me. I'm making up this story in my mind that she doesn't like me. I came to these conclusions. Let's make up another story instead
Hmm.
because we don't know, right? I'm not going to confront her. Why did you blow me off, right? I'm not going to do that. So just make up another story. She didn't see me. Oh, well, she didn't see me,
It
right?
happens.
Yeah, it happens. So, don't let yourself go down that rabbit hole. Because you know what, Joe? We cause ourselves so much unhappiness in the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
We really do. And the first part of my book is all about that. Why are we unhappy? Well, let me tell you why we're unhappy. You may be doing this. You may not be doing all of it. But many times we are causing our own level of
Yeah.
unhappiness. So,
It's very, very true. And it's so easy to, like you say, go down that rabbit hole. I remember I told you my sister had passed away in a car accident, and we were at the funeral. I'm about to give a eulogy, and somebody comes up to me and says, you know, maybe the worst thing possible. Are you hearing what people are saying about Rose's passing in the car accident? And I said, how dare you come to me with this? We have my parents there that have lost their offspring, and you're coming to me with it. So I made a conscious decision, and it's very similar. Shift the perspective. I i will only care about 4 or 5 people and what they think of me, and those are the closest to me, and I can't control anyone else. And so I'll do my best to make impressions, but I can't control what other people think or do. So you have to be able to shift your perspective.
yes, good for you
My
for
goodness.
recognizing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's comforting, and it's very relieving knowing that just don't always assume the worst. And your last is trust with no expectations.
yeah, yeah. So often we trust that things are going to work out exactly how they're supposed to,
Mm.
right? But many times we still place an expectation on that. So what I'm talking about is, okay, you know, you're going, let me just use this. You're going out on a date. I'm just going to trust that everything works out the way it's
Mm.
supposed to. But then you're on the date and you really think this person's really cute or whatever. And you start, you think, okay, they're going to call me tomorrow. And you place that expectation there and they don't. And you're disappointed, right? So in order to let your life flow exactly how it's supposed to is just trust that everything works out exactly how it's supposed to. And if you start thinking about any sort of expectation, you got to let that go,
Mm.
because all that's going to do is disappoint you. I always say, I'm a surfer girl, just ride the waves. Just
Yeah.
ride the waves and just let it flow exactly how it's supposed to. Because it always works out. Like whenever you think back of a situation where you were like worried about it and you're stressed, it always worked out exactly how it's supposed to. But let me add to that. If you can control a situation, then there's no need to worry about it because you have control over
Right.
it. If you can't control a situation, then there's no need to worry about it because you have no control over it. You just have to go with the flow. So trust with no expectations is just about letting your life flow exactly how it's supposed to.
Fascinating,
Yeah.
Sandee. And there are like, okay, you talked about when that tragedy happened, and there are people that actually do need therapy. How do you kind of separate that between therapy and coaching?
Oh, yeah, that's huge and a great question because so when you're coaching somebody and you recognize that they are in a place, so coaching is about helping people get from here to here.
Mm.
All right. So my clients are, you know, they're people who they've got their life together. They don't have any, major issues. They just need help going to the next level.
I see.
Okay. When I when my life hit rock bottom,
Mm.
I was way down here. I needed therapy because I didn't know that I had PTSD. And I never liked
Hmm.
to use that before because I always associated PTSD with like war veterans
Sure,
or
veterans, football players.
people that were in, prisoned and
Yeah.
things like that. But PTSD is anytime you're in a traumatic situation,
Hmm.
things come up. So if I have a person that I'm working with and I'm hearing certain things that they're saying, and I'm like, if they're talking about being depressed, if somebody says that they're depressed, I immediately say, you need to go to a therapist. I cannot
Ah,
help you. Once you work through your depression, I will be here and I will help you get you to where you want to go. But I'm not a trained, psychologist or licensed, clinical licensed social worker. So I cannot, it would be irresponsible for me to help somebody. And I would never do that because, that's a fragile situation if somebody's in that state of mind. Yeah.
very interesting. And are your clients generally the people that you want to help in the business world? Are they where what kind of people do you help?
So I have two group coaching programs right now. As I mentioned earlier, it's a hybrid group coaching program. So I have one that is called Happiness Solved for Entrepreneurs
Hmm.
because that's my theme. So I help business owners, small business owners, entrepreneurs take their business to the next level. Scale their business to 6 and 7 figures and beyond. But it's a lot about mindset because a big reason why business owners can't get their business to the next level is because they're thinking small or they
Right.
have limiting beliefs. So we're working through a lot of those. And so since that program had so much mindset training, I was like, well, I can just put this into another program. So I have Happiness Solved for Everyone. And that's what takes my book to the next level.
Hmm.
Because in my book, in the back, I've got all these exercises. So I don't know if you can see that. I've got different exercises. So it's also a workbook.
Hmm.
And the thing is that nobody's going to read my book or anybody else's book and instantly be happy.
Right.
So it's a very short read. And if you do the exercises every day for 30 days, you will begin to create lasting change in your life. But as I said, most people are not going to do that. They may do it for a day, a week, couple of weeks, and then they stop doing it.
Hmm.
So I have Happiness Solved for Everyone, and it takes my book to the next level where you will have accountability. group coaching, one-on-one coaching, daily check-ins, things like that, to make sure that you are actually, you're being held accountable, so that you are actually able to make lasting changes in your life. But then I take it to another level with that one, as with both, like manifesting and creating the life of your dreams. What are you passionate about?
Hmm.
Where do you want your life to be? How can you create that? So, and I have a third one that I'm actually working on, which is Happiness Solved Athletics.
Ah.
And I'm going to be working with 12 of the top ice dancers in the United States that are training nearby.
Hmm.
I have a gold medal in ice dancing. So I'm going to be working with them as their mindset coach. And so I'm putting a third program together to work with athletes, which I kind of have a feeling is really, a true passion of mine,
Hmm.
obviously.
I know a
Yeah.
lot of business owners, and yeah, they are the reason why they're not growing.
Yes, it is. It is. I mean, I've been there myself. I've owned 8 companies over the
Hmm.
years. And because I'm just an entrepreneur at heart. So I'm always, oh, let me try this. Let me try this. And I know, I really do know what to do and what not to do. And most of it comes down to marketing and lead generation. And how are
Hmm.
you finding your clients? But again, the mindset comes into that as well. And how do they, bring those clients on board? Because when you have limiting beliefs, it's going to come through when you're speaking with potential clients.
Yeah, absolutely. Happiness. And then you had another. I love the kind of short. You're really good at this, and you could tell you're a business owner. You had another. So you had 5 ways to get happy, and then you also had 5 ways to kind of reset your stress, which is
Yes.
on the road, of course, to happiness. Your first one is exercise.
Yes, exercise. Yeah. And I was so grateful to be featured on Good Morning Arizona recently, live. My first time on live TV. It was such a great experience. Yeah. So, exercise, obviously, exercise is so important because it releases endorphins. And when those endorphins are released, it calms you down. So, that's so, so important. Yeah.
Hmm.
Exercise. And then I go into gratitude again.
Yeah.
Gratitude is another way to reduce stress.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
seems like a theme. That, by the way, that's why I asked you if you were in the Southwest because I saw Good Morning Arizona.
You
Yeah,
know, I'm in a media training program,
I see.
and I work with a publicist every week,
Ah,
and you just pitch the media, and you just kind of see where you can get a spot.
I see.
So
I see.
yeah.
Gratitude, and then you talk about deep breathing. I mean, breathing. We're
Yes.
finding out. I used to do a lot of yoga, and in through the nose, out through the mouth. I
Yep.
mean, it's everything, isn't it?
It is everything. And my son was diagnosed with severe generalized anxiety disorder. And there's
Mm,
so many times where I go into his room and he's so anxious. And I'm like, okay, let's take 10 deep breaths. And he starts, you know, and
mm,
after like 3 or 4 breaths, you can just see his facial muscles just relax.
mm.
And even though he knows to do it, like he forgets, right? Because when you're in that moment, it's real,
Yeah.
right? It's totally real. And we sometimes forget, what we need to do.
So often, in stressful times, every once in a while, I'll just catch myself. I'm not breathing. And
Yeah.
you have to, I play some sports as well, and even at my age, and just deep breathing. Your fourth one is grounding or earthing. You talked about just walking on the beach and that connection to the planet.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is you don't have to go to the beach to experience that. But that's why people are drawn to walk along the beach and they don't
Mm,
even know what's happening. They're in their bare feet. The electrons from the earth are pulling negativity out of them, but it's also calming and balancing for our emotions. And they don't even know it. But here's the thing, you don't have to go to the beach. Just take off your shoes and walk on the grass.
hmm,
I mean, why do you think when you go to a park, you see people laying on the grass? They're not laying on a blanket, right?
right.
Many times people are just laying down on the grass. It's because it feels so good. And most people don't even know what it is that's happening. But it's literally balancing and calming you down.
Especially
Oh,
in this world that we're on our
yeah.
laptops, we're on our phones, we're inside, we're in Wi-Fi, and yeah, just get out there and yeah, it's so true and it's so helping. And your last one is trust.
Trust again. Whether you're trying to be happy or de-stress, it's the same thing. It's
Yes.
just trust that everything's going to work out, because when we're stressed, what I said earlier, you're worrying about something.
Mm.
All right. You're worrying about the outcome of a situation. And the best thing you can do is just let it go and just trust that everything's going to work out. So often I've seen people, I've had family members die of cancer,
Mm.
and they were the most stressed out people I've ever met.
Wow.
And it's so sad that, my sister-in-law died. It's my ex-husband's sister. She died while he was in prison, and she had cancer, and she was the biggest worry wart. And I would just
Mm.
talk to her and be like, you've got to stop worrying. It's eating you up alive. It's eating you. It's just eating away. And it's just a hard thing for some people. And I'm just here to say, there's another way to live, and you don't have to. I talk about pressing the reset button,
Mm.
and that's what I talked about on that segment that I did for Good Morning Arizona. Press the reset button at any point during the day, and just think about these tools and reset your day, because you can always start your day over. It doesn't have to, what's going on right now doesn't have to continue through the rest of the day, and you don't have to keep holding on to it. Just let it go and trust.
It's very true. The theme of the podcast is discipline, only because I feel that I that was the common answer to a lot of problems I have, and I would submit that a lot of your gratitude, or forgiveness, all these things, you need some level of discipline to execute these things.
Yes. And that is why I say in my book, you need to do them for 30 days in a row at a
Mm.
minimum, because that is how you create a habit. So I've been doing all of the things I talk about in my book every day for 30 years,
Wow.
over 30 years now. So it's definitely a habit for me. Now, am I perfect? Absolutely not. Do I have days where I sit and stew for hours? Absolutely.
Hmm.
I'm human, and it's okay, right? The difference is 30 years ago, I would spend a week or 2 weeks stewing over something. Today, maybe it lasts a day.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's a few days. It depends, right? It depends on who it is. I recently had a situation with a very close friend of mine, and I felt betrayed by her. And it took me a few weeks. It wasn't consuming me, but every time her name or popped into my head, it'd be like, ugh, and
Ah.
I'd be just feeling this because I felt so betrayed. And when I finally let that go, I got a text message from her apologizing to me,
Hmm.
right? Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Right? And I don't think she intentionally betrayed me. I was probably making up a story, and that's okay, because we all do it. It's real. So I always like to say, as a caveat, when you're going through this stuff, do not beat yourself up. It's okay. I've been living this way for over 30 years, and I still go through it. I still get pissed off at my husband, right? I get angry. I lose my temper. I'm human. I feel, hurt. These are normal emotions, and you're supposed to feel this way.
Hmm.
We are supposed to feel this way. The difference is how long will you let it disrupt your life, right? It's like, don't let it disrupt your life for too long, but you have to feel it. When I felt like I was betrayed, I had to feel those feelings, and it took me a few weeks to sort it out, because it was very hurtful for me. And that's kind of one of my Achilles heels for me. We all have that one thing.
Sure.
And as a woman, and I'm sure any of the women listeners out there probably can relate to this, is that girls can be really, really mean to each
Mm.
other.
Mm.
And for me, it goes back, and you probably dealt with this with your daughters, right? I have so many bad memories and stab wounds of my girlfriends that were so mean to me. And it's
Wow.
been throughout, I'm 55 years old. It's been going on my entire life. And it just happened again this year, and it's still raw,
Hmm.
right? It's hard, but it's real, and I had to allow myself to go through it. It didn't consume my life. It didn't consume my day. It would pop into my mind, and I deal with it, and then I just move on. You shift gears and you move on with your day. But those emotions are real, and you have to allow yourself to feel it, because what I don't want people to do is push it aside, because That's what I did with the death of my brother, and
Mm,
all it did was landed me in outpatient rehab, right?
mm, yeah.
That was, yeah. So you don't want to go down that path either.
Fascinating. Sandee Sgarlata, just an absolute pleasure. I mean, if we can all increase our happiness in this country, in the planet, can you imagine how much better community there would be? I mean,
Oh, I can imagine it, and I hope to see it in my lifetime.
yeah,
Yeah.
I do as well. Such a pleasure talking with you. Now, how can we get in touch with you?
So my website is sandeesgarlata.com, and my email is sandeesgarlata.com.
And of course, Sandee is Sandee, and
Yes.
Scarlata is Sgarlata. Of course, it'll be in the notes here.
Yes, exactly.
Thanks so much for your
Yeah,
time. Uh oh.
when I was in high school, Grease came out and all my friends called me Sandra D. So I decided that since my name is really Sandra, I could spell Sandy any way I
I
liked. And so I
see.
kind of combined it. So that's the story and it stuck with me. And
It
yeah.
works. It works. It's yeah. You're a great pleasure to talk to, and I wish you great success. And I hope one day, my daughter's going to Maryland in 2 weeks. It's not too far from me.
Nice.
Yeah.
University of Maryland. Yay.
Yes. 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 And I'll be empty nest, and it'll be something. But it was a great pleasure talking with you today. I wish you great success, and hopefully we get to see each other in the future.
All right. Thank you, Joe. Thank you. It was such an honor to be on here today. Thank you so much.
Thanks again. Bye now.